We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
Anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
Goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world
where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
Where everyone goes to school
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed back.
we will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
at home, at school, and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper
And new wealth
lead to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated
Inside our countries
and between different countries.
Where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back to threat climate change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
And protect life on land.
The forests,
animals,
the earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
To end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
And inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
a 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
Goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning
Asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone goes to school
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive and be powerful
And safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed back.
we will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
and proper toilets
at home, at school, and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper
And new wealth
lead to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated
Inside our countries
and between different countries.
Where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back to threat climate change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
And protect life on land.
The forests,
animals,
the earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people
Work together.
partnerships of all kinds
To make these goals
a reality.
For everyone, everywhere.
These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Let's make it happen.
We are facing an existential crisis.
Unlike anything the world has ever seen.
We need to take action.
Everyone has to stand up.
The warning is not a new one.
Our world faces a triple planetary crisis of climate change, nature loss and pollution.
For generations, humanity, often without realizing it, has been destroying the natural world. In the name of progress, we have polluted the Earth's oceans, chopped down its forests and clouded its skies. Today, nature and our own survival rest on a knife's edge.
It's time to ratchet up the action that we need to have at the country level.
The United Nations Environment Programme was established with one goal in mind: to unite the world in saving our planet.
It is clear that the environmental crisis which is confronting the world will profoundly alter the future destiny of our planet.
For 5 decades, UNEP has used science and its mandate to bring the world together to help nations find solutions to grave environmental threats.
What is this pollution that we have heard so much about?
The Mediterranean is sick. It's being poisoned slowly but steadily for those who need it most.
The 1970s found a world grappling with an unprecedented crisis of pollution. Could the seemingly irreparable damage be undone? UNEP inspired the world to take action, preventing oil spills and toxic discharge by ships, uniting 143 coastal states to limit ocean pollution and save marine life, reducing air pollution and ending the scourge of acid rain. But soon, the world would face its biggest environmental challenge yet.
The destruction of the ozone layer on a global scale is no longer just a theory. The hole over the Antarctica is no longer an isolated seasonal phenomenon.
If the breach continued to grow, the planet would suffer lethal levels of ultraviolet radiation, harming human health, biodiversity, and climate. In 1987, UNEP facilitated the Montreal Protocol. Over 30 countries agreed to phase out the production of almost 100 ozone-depleting substances. The protocol remains one of the greatest achievements of multilateralism.
All nations gathered here to be proud of what we had achieved.
This success set the tone for a series of powerful accords, limiting the movement of toxic waste across borders, protecting the Earth from dangerous, long-lasting chemicals, and restricting the international trade in mercury. Most recently, in 2021, UNEP finished a 2-decade-long campaign to rid the world of highly toxic leaded petrol, saving an estimated 1 million lives each year. As the world grappled with pollution and waste, another crisis was brewing.
I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and marine forests, full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see.
Poaching and habitat loss were pushing some of the world's most iconic animals to the brink of extinction. Driven by science, UNEP supported a series of international treaties, limiting and in some cases banning the trade of endangered species, safeguarding migratory animals, expanding protected areas and increasing financing for biodiversity protection. The seminal Earth Summit in Brazil introduced the idea of sustainable development.
This is an historical moment for the mobilization of all peoples of the world.
Over the last 5 decades, UNEP has helped more than 100 countries enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions and produced scientific studies to guide member states in their decision-making. In 2012, a new international body was established to provide scientific data on biodiversity in a joint effort from UNEP and other UN organizations. In 2019, it found that 1 million species face the threat of extinction, underscoring the urgency to act.
Every action we take alters the earth that future generations will inherit.
The world is starting to recognize the effects of planetary warming, but UNEP began sounding the alarm 3 decades ago. As early as 1988, UNEP and the World Meteorological Organization launched the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. For over 30 years, IPCC science has helped member states counter climate change, earning the body a Nobel Prize for its work. UNEP-backed studies have informed some of the planet's most crucial climate accords. These include a 1992 agreement that set a template for curbing greenhouse gas emissions, followed by the Kyoto Protocol and the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement.
I'm proud to announce that 175 parties have signed the Paris Agreement.
UNEP has also mobilized 450 banks, insurers and investors to help create a more sustainable world.
We don't want fossil fuels anymore.
A lot has happened in the last 50 years, but it's the next 10 that will be pivotal for life on this planet.
But in fact, what you and I and other ordinary people around the world can do will not by itself save the natural world. The great decisions, the great disasters that face us can only be dealt with by governments. And that's why this organization is so important.
Over the past 50 years, we've seen when the world decides to act, the world comes together to act. Together with member states and partners, we've achieved a lot. But now is the time to truly make that lift for humanity and to do much more and much faster. And I have every reason to be hopeful. As an organization grounded in science, UNEP will do everything in its power to push for breakthroughs. Our planet and humanity depends on us. Together, we can build a greener and safer and fairer world for all.
We can be.
We must be
The first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die of
diseases we know how to cure. And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where
everyone goes to school.
And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is held back.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets at home,
at school,
and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light, and power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper
and new wealth
leads to decent jobs
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
where prejudices and extremes of inequality
are defeated
inside our countries
and between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
Where we restore and protect
Life on land, the forests,
animals, the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open
and answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
and the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people
Work together.
partnerships of all kinds
To make these goals a reality.
For everyone, everywhere.
These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Let's make it happen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please, can someone confirm they can hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rahmat Sani. Okay, thank you. The head for Media and Communications, AIIDEV Africa, and you all are welcome to today's session, the first session for the workshop series for Teach4SDGs. We are glad to have everyone on the call, and I would also like to say a big welcome to our guest speaker, Madam Amanda Abram. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's session. And to our participants, I can see various participants from all across Africa. We have people from Lagos State, Nigeria. We have people from Kaduna. We have other people from every other part of Africa. Yes, you're all welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's session. Before we move on, I would like to properly introduce our guest speaker. I would like to read out her profile. Like I mentioned earlier, her name is Amanda Abram. She is a dedicated education and international development professional with a fervent belief in the power of learning to drive positive global change. And as the director of the Global Schools Program at Sustainable Development Solutions Network, she is wholeheartedly committed to advancing education for sustainable development and empowering the next generation of leaders. Her journey in education has been fueled by a deep understanding of the vital role it plays in shaping a more equitable and sustainable world. With a vision to create a planet where every student is equipped with the knowledge, skills, and values to tackle complex global challenges, she leads the charge in integrating sustainability into curricula, fostering cross-cultural understanding, and promoting innovative teaching methodologies. She brings a wealth of experience and expertise to her role, having worked at the intersection of education and sustainable development for many years. Prior to her current position, she held key roles in various educational institutions and international organizations where she championed initiatives aimed at enhancing access to quality education and fostering global citizenship. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am. We are glad to have you on the call today.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much to everyone for the invitation, and I'm really excited to spend the next 40 minutes here with you all, talking a little bit about our work, but specifically on education for sustainable development. So I will start by sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, and I believe every other person can see it as well.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll start. So the first thing I wanted to do before getting into the lecture content on education for sustainable development was just tell you all briefly about the Global Schools program, which, as you heard in the wonderful introduction, thank you so much for that introduction, is an initiative of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So we are focused on teacher training for primary and secondary educators across the world, and we have a large network of schools in approximately 100 countries that have all committed to integrating sustainable development into their long-term plans and strategies. And really, the mission of our work is to support students in gaining the skills and knowledge and experiences to really solve challenges in their community when it comes to sustainable development and sustainability. So this is just a map. This is actually from last year, so there's a couple more schools to update on our map. But as you can see, we have a wide variety of schools in our community that we work with to do trainings on the SDGs, and that gives you just an idea of where we are located. So for this session, what I thought I'd talk about is first about sustainable development from a development perspective in general, and then move into the education side. And finally, at the very end, try to give you all some practical ideas, because I understand mostly everyone here is a primary or secondary educator working directly with students in some capacity. So at the end, I will give some practical ideas and suggestions for taking the SDGs to your classrooms. So I know we just had the opportunity to watch two wonderful videos to start out this session, which really was great framing on sustainable development. But this is one of the definitions of sustainable development that I really like. So it's sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this really guides our overall work when we're thinking about sustainability and helping schools design projects that will really help students come together and learn this overall competency through the work that we're doing with them. So this was also in the video, which is wonderful, was first kind of really coming into a huge concept in Rio, Brazil in 1992, and then continued with a variety of other protocols and reports monitoring this as we continued in the next decades. So here, when we're talking about sustainable development, before we get into the SDGs, here's one of the United Nations definitions for the different categories of sustainable development. So often we talk about environmental sustainability, which is sometimes the first thing that comes to mind when we think about sustainability and teaching our students about that topic. But at Global Schools, we really also try to discuss this in a very holistic way. So not only the environmental domain, but also the social domain when it comes to people, ending poverty and hunger, and ensuring equity. Also the economic domain, and the political or cultural aspects. So here is a great graph that I think really emphasizes the different facets of sustainable development, from people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet. So we're all ensuring a better future for generations to come with the resources that we do have. So I assume that maybe some of you know about the Sustainable Development Goals, but just to do a quick review here, but maybe not everyone knows about them. So to create the Sustainable Development Goals, these were a series of goals that were basically brought together in consensus by 193 governments around the world in a 3-year consultation process. There were approximately 84 national surveys, and 7 million people across the planet participated in this process to think about, what are the goals we want as we move together in the world, as individual nations and societies and communities, but also globally at the United Nations. So what is the framework we can work towards in 2030? So through this consultation process, in September 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals were passed at the United Nations headquarters. And probably many of you have seen these goals before, but here is a list of them, and they range, as I mentioned, everything from the environmental side to the economic side to the society, as well as political and cultural aspects are also represented here as well, although not as much as when we think about economic, society, and environment. So I'll leave that here for 30 seconds so you can take a look at all of the goals. And these were really built off the, in addition to the Millennium Development Goals, when we had 8 goals. And these are unique and different because they were done through a wide consultation process, and they really go a bit more specific because there are 17 goals versus just the 8 Millennium Development Goals. So that brings me to the question, how are we doing on achieving these goals since September 2015? So at this moment in time, no country in the world is really on track to achieve all of these sustainable development goals by the timeline that the United Nations has set, which is 2030. So our company, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, puts out a report every June called the Sustainable Development Report, which gives each of the countries a global score on how they're doing on each of the SDGs. So this report for 2024 is coming out in June by our research and data team. So I encourage all of you to anticipate that report and look at that report to see how your countries are doing when it comes to the various SDGs. So here's an example of what the reports look like. They show whether a specific country is on track to achieve the goal by 2030, whether they're doing better than before when their score is moderately increasing, or if it's kind of staying the same or decreasing. So I just pulled an example here of how the data looks. So, but the whole purpose of this is to say that, we are not necessarily on track to achieve the goals by 2030, which is why education becomes such an important piece, and educators themselves have such a huge and important role to play. There's also the Paris Climate Accords, which we saw in the opening video as well, and the importance of reducing gas emissions, CO2 emissions, and only a handful of countries in the world are also on track to reach net zero by 2050. So these are kind of the two large frameworks we have to monitor these things, but we still see that a lot more progress needs to be made. Okay. So I'm going to skip ahead now to the education component because we're all educators and really want to get into the education side of sustainable development. So I'll start out with this quote by Nelson Mandela, which I really love. And a lot of the teachers that we work with also quote this when they're doing different presentations. But education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And we really see that in connecting the large-scale sustainable development goals with the education piece. So education for sustainable development, kind of the methodologies and the frameworks behind this really talks about giving students the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that they really need to be able to shape a sustainable future going forward. So how can we really ensure that there is, resources for future generations? And how can we instill competencies and then learning outcomes across these 4 areas on students' knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values to really be global citizens and be civically engaged in their local communities on the SDG issues. So if you're wondering where this is represented specifically in the SDGs, it's in SDG target 4.7. So if you're interested in looking that up and seeing where sustainable development education is considered by the United Nations, this is the target. And here is where it is stated right here, ensure all learners acquire the skills needed to promote sustainable development. So we might be asking ourselves, yes, this is important for the world and society, but is this good for education? So a lot of research has been done on environmental education and education for sustainable development. And there was a really big analysis that came out of Stanford that actually shows there is great benefit for teaching our students ESD or environmental education topics. So they looked at 120 different surveys all over the world with different contexts, different students, different disciplines, and they saw that students that were learning about environmental education actually had 98% knowledge gains across academic disciplines. They had enhanced environmentally related behaviors, and 90% reported increased skills, general skills of students when it came to education, competencies, and foundational skills. So ESD, there's so many impacts we see to this in research studies, not only that it's good for the planet, but it actually is good for the students when it comes to their own learning. So there's a lot of studies on this. I'm happy to share these with you after the presentation. But we see that students that are engaging in education for sustainable development and learning about the SDGs, they see enhanced critical thinking and problem solving, improved values when it comes to gender equality, more motivation to learn, increased knowledge gains, increased attendance rates in some cases, which I have seen anecdotal evidence on this in my own experience at the Global Schools program, better mental health, and improved conflict resolution skills. So when we talk about education for sustainable development, there's a lot of different ways we can break this down, but I'm going to focus specifically on the SDGs themselves. Okay, I'm just skipping ahead so we have enough time to get to the practical examples here. So if you look at UNESCO publications when it talks about education for sustainable development, there's a lot of different competencies that they talk about, which can get very detailed. But so I just put them up here. But basically, some of the main competencies that we see when we're talking about sustainable development and thinking about teaching the students that you work with the SDGs are here. So thinking about how we can have them solve problems, how we can help them be more self-aware, engage in critical thinking, collaborating with each other, being able to anticipate and evaluate what might happen in the future, and kind of understand the systems around them. So it's not only about teaching what the SDGs are, but these are the competencies that underline the SDGs when we talk about education for sustainable development. So it's really, how can we teach so students can achieve the SDGs rather than teaching about them, but teaching for them. So I just wanted to show you some of the competencies that underline the SDGs themselves that have been accepted by the United Nations. Okay. So this is also showcased in a lot of reports. So here are some other ones that you can look up and see how different countries are doing when it comes to sustainable development. So I put them here as you can reference them for yourselves or keep doing further reading on this aspect. So I want to spend the time also giving you practical ideas for the classroom when it comes to teaching the SDGs and lesson ideas, because I feel like that is usually very useful when giving training presentations and lectures for educators working directly with students or with other teachers in their departments, or maybe they have a role where they have to work with their school administrators, school directors, or school boards. So it's always great to think about what could be some practical ideas that you could suggest to bring sustainable development in the classroom. But it's also good to have the background knowledge if you're convincing other people in your school why this is important. There is a lot of research that backs this type of education and teaching the SDGs. Okay, so I put the SDGs here one more time so we all can reference them. So also please feel free to post any questions in the chat that you have, and hopefully the facilitators and project team will be able to get those to me so I can answer those questions. But I want everyone to, think about one of these SDGs that you identify with or you think would be a really great one to introduce in your classroom. And so think about that SDG as we go through some different examples. So I was a teacher for quite a few years before working with all of the global schools that I work with. And these were kind of the principles that I thought of when thinking about planning my lessons for the SDGs. So the first one is the importance of localization. So sometimes the SDGs can feel like these large goals by the United Nations, and students need to feel like these things are relevant when you're teaching them in the classroom. So how can we tie the SDG that you're thinking about to the local context? That's the first thing I always would think about when planning a lesson. The second one was thinking, how can I integrate this into my classroom material and my units that I already need to teach? Is that maybe bringing in a news article? Is that maybe adding an additional global perspective when we're talking about like geography themes or different biomes? I taught history, geography, music, and English were the subjects that I taught. So how can I maybe integrate these concepts in the learning outcomes that I already have and expand those a little bit? And the third was promoting an interdisciplinary approach. This is really great if you're working with the SDGs across your entire school community or doing a big whole of school event or activity. How can you really engage students learning across multiple disciplines and multiple teachers getting involved? Okay, so these are some examples. So first I'll do the importance of localization, giving you some examples. So for SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, discussing clean water. So example, if I was in the United States, I could talk specifically about a water crisis that was in a state that I was in and have the students maybe write an advocacy piece to the local government. And here's another example for SDG 16, how to bring it to the local community. Maybe if I'm working in sub-Saharan Africa or in a country there, I could discuss community activists and take this lesson back to the classroom when it comes to peace and justice and strong institutions, and learning about specific SDG advocates from my local community, and mapping resources around that. So always thinking about how we can bring that back to the local context. Okay, so then the next one I'm going to talk about here is that second principle that I always find helpful when planning my lessons, is how to relate it to what I already have to do in the classroom. So if I was teaching second language education and I already had to teach the students new vocabulary and grammar about work and working, maybe one of the lessons I could do was having the students interviewing someone from a different country about their job. And that would have them maybe get into a discussion about the SDGs and how these things work across different countries. And for example, if I was a math teacher and maybe I had to do a unit on data analysis and inputting data and learning about how to create graphs already in my unit plan, I could maybe have the students poll everyone else in their school on their mode of transportation and see how many carbon emissions they emit on their way to school. So just fun and different activities, thinking about how we can use what we're already doing and not completely change the material, but how can we make it relevant to the SDGs? And principle 3, just making things interdisciplinary, as I mentioned. Here's just an example. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but this example just shows how across many different subjects you can talk about one SDG. Sometimes when I work with the teachers that I work with, they have a hard time thinking about how they can relate SDGs to their specific subject that they have to teach. But there's always many, many creative ideas. And the great thing is that you all are part of a community and a cohort where you can bounce ideas off each other. So one other thing when we're talking about teaching the SDGs is thinking about how to engage students across different learning domains. So when we talk about this, we not only want to engage students on the cognitive domain, so what they're learning as far as their core knowledge, but also their values and attitudes, and also their actions. And actions are arguably the most important piece when we're talking about the SDGs. So these are really the things when we're thinking about bringing the SDGs to the classroom, how can we also promote an action with our lesson plans or activities? And I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to keep going. So I wanted to show some examples from the Global Schools Network of example lesson plans that I saw, just to continue putting this into practice. So this is a lesson plan I saw on SDG 12, responsible consumption, where we had students upcycle materials and transform trash into beautiful pieces that they could use and display, and had an artistic competition. So those are the two on the left, these two photos. And then on the right, there was another activity that the students did, was taking old t-shirts and dyeing them, and then thinking about how to be entrepreneurs when it comes to these new clothing, and how they can upcycle clothing and learn about basic things when it comes to math and business. So here's another example I saw with SDG 11. So two different examples. This on the right, students actually designed a house that they thought was safe and sustainable, and talking about what is necessary for a safe house and community living, which was a really great example of SDG 11. And on this side, what we have here was thinking about safe spaces in the community and where students want to play. So one of our teachers had all of their students outside in the school compound, and this was a map of their city, and they marked all of the spaces around the map where they thought it was safe for them to play in the community, And then they talked about how can we design a safe playground that the students want, or a safe school compound and a sustainable school. So both of these are great examples of activities that you could do on SDG 11. Here's one on SDG 6, clean water. So this was actually a math assignment on clean water, where the students had to design experiments using Excel and track experiments. That was the things that they were required to do for their class. So what the teacher decided to do is to have all of the students use a timer and see how long it took them to brush their teeth while they were using this timer. And the first time they did the experiment, they left the water running while they were brushing their teeth. And the second time, they turned off the water while they were brushing their teeth. And then they tracked how much water usage is wasted when people don't turn off the water while brushing their teeth, and was able to create an advocacy campaign in their school. Okay. So we have a lot more examples of activities on the Global Schools website at globalschoolsprogram.org. We have 2 guidebooks featuring teachers from all over the world and all of the great work they're doing on the SDGs. And I also would encourage you, if you have any examples to include in these reports, we would love to also include your case study stories of what you're doing with the SDGs in your classroom to inspire other educators and give them other ideas of what they can do. Before I get to the end and leave some time for questions, I just want to quickly make a note of primary students or early childhood and the SDGs, because a lot of teachers that I talk to, they ask me questions on how can we talk about these big issues and climate and justice with younger students, because sometimes these can be anxiety-ridden topics, sometimes they can seem to be heavy topics, and how can we think about the SDGs with younger students? So I will just give you a few ideas about how we can think about the SDGs and teaching them if you're working with younger learners, which I think is something that is also very important. So I showed you the other example with clean water SDG 6 in the classroom, which was a secondary student example, because they were doing data and experiments and work with graphs. But there's a lot of things that we can think about when it comes to early childhood education, maybe students that are 3, 4, 5 years old that still relate to the SDGs. And these are things that we can talk about. Using water, where the water comes from, even making decisions on water, or healthy habits. This was an activity I saw in Kenya, where the students actually mapped the pond and the lakes in their local community. And these students were about 5 years old and talking about the water sources around them and where it comes from. In addition, this example also for SDG 11 could be thought about for even early childhood education, talking about community and family and understanding the necessities, to live and the neighborhood around them. So that's another way we can think about sustainable communities when it comes to younger students. Lastly, sometimes a lot of topics when it comes to, peace can also seem heavy for younger students, but these are also competencies we can think about for early childhood education, learning how to ask for help, self-identity and belonging, how to recognize emotions in others, learning about how to listen to others, or learning how to respect others are all things that can go into the values and attitudes when it comes to SDG 16 and 5 that can still be extremely relevant for younger students, and likely are things that you already have to teach younger students in your national curriculum. So this is kind of bringing me to the end of my formal presentation, but I'm really would love to have any questions. But just to mention, we have a lot of activities guides and lesson plans in 13 languages. The lesson plans are in 13 languages on our website, globalschoolsprogram.org, if you're looking for other ideas of what to do for the SDGs. And as I mentioned before, these case study books where you can get other ideas and inspirational stories from teachers, seeing what they're doing in their classroom, not only specifically the activities, but how they're really trying to be advocates across their school communities to get their school leaders engaged and get their school boards involved, because sometimes that's also a challenge. And so this is our website, globalschoolsprogram.org. I also want to invite you all, we're having applications for teachers that want to represent our global community. So those are open till the end of the month at globalschoolsprogram.org/apply. So if anyone is interested in engaging in more training courses or kind of being an advocate at the international level when it comes to the work that we do in close partnership with the United Nations, I would encourage you to go to our website and look at the information. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about teaching the SDGs or about the work that we do.
All right, thank you so much. We do appreciate the value that you have shared. And it's been wonderful to have you on this call, Madam Amanda. Thank you for those inspiring thoughts. And I believe our teachers has gained one or two knowledge, a lot knowledge from your lecture this evening. So I hand over to Ramat to continue from here. Ramat.
We do have so much also for the amazing presentation. It was really insightful. And here we have one of the teachers asking how they can integrate the SDGs into teaching literature. We have one other person asking how it can be integrated into teaching mathematics, and then the third person asking how SDGs can be integrated into teaching. Until we still have any extra.
So I heard the first two questions. I did not hear the last question. Maybe you can write it in the chat for me to see. But if I understand, the first question was how to integrate the SDGs in literature, and the second was in mathematics. So ideas for literature that I've seen is choosing maybe texts or books. If you have the ability to choose your own texts within your national curriculum that relate to some of the topics that we see in the SDGs. So there's a list of these books in many languages. It's the UN SDG book club, which I would suggest going on and having your students maybe read some of these passages. There's also a lot of fun comics that talk about the topics of the SDGs and heroes in stories. So one thing is you could maybe have students write their own comics depending on their age and designing their own literature when it comes to sharing about stories related to the SDGs. Another thing that I have seen is poetry poetry sessions and open and spoken word poetry, where the students have to create a poem that addresses different issues, and then they have to present these to another class or maybe to other students. Another thing I've seen is reflective essays. So maybe every first day of the week, in the morning, you could have the students write for 10 minutes in a journal a reflective essay on how they see their community. And maybe each week there could be a different prompt on writing and reflection. So those are just some initial ideas I have for literature and kind of those skills that come with literature courses. On math, I think it's really great to use different graphs that address the SDGs. There's, I think Our World in Data has some wonderful things. Our company also does a program on GIS skills for students, or even creating math problems that are related to maybe environmental issues, rather than if you're able to do word problems that are related to specific issues on the SDGs could be another way to engage in math, or also some of those experiments that I mentioned, and then having students do calculations on the different experiments to improve their math skills. We also have a STEM guide for teachers within our Advocates Toolkit that gives a lot of different ideas for math education. And can you remind me what the third question? I wasn't able to hear the third question well.
The third was in computer science. How to integrate the SDG in teaching computer science.
Yeah, I think well, computer science can be so many different things depending on exactly what your curriculum is for computer science and the level of your teaching and what age of students. But maybe some things that you could do would be to have them think about designing their own apps, maybe that give ideas for the SDGs, or doing advocacy work through apps. That could be something that could be interesting for the students. You could also have them do some work on cleaning or compiling data. You can have them have a survey around the whole entire school, getting people's opinions or thoughts on things in the school, and doing a school investigation. And then using computer science and programming skills to produce some graphs or reports that could be presented to the school leadership. So those are just some two initial ideas when it comes to computer science. There's a lot of other links out there, so I can send them if I have more context on kind of what the scope is on that curriculum. So.
I have another question here saying, according to your data, you said no country in the world is on track to achieve SDGs by 2030. What could be the reason for not achieving it by 2030? And the second one says, in some of our communities, we still have a good number of out-of-school children. Could we inculcate these goals by bringing the education to the grassroots?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So I think the reason that no country is on track, I mean, it's very multifaceted. There was a lot of challenges with the pandemic that set different development goals backwards. One of the other main issues is there's a huge lack of financing and funding to actually achieve these SDGs. It's a very, very big gap, and the exact number is escaping me right now, but those are kind of the big issues that are presenting, some of the reasons for not achieving the SDGs by 2030. And also, a lot of, individuals and people have their own incentives, and sometimes there's not full collaboration together on this work. So that's kind of the short answer, but I also would encourage you to explore the Sustainable Development Report, because for each country, it breaks down each SDG and the progress specifically on the targets. So you'll get more information on your country, which is also really a good activity to do with students, to look at your country, see how the SDGs are faring, and maybe pick 3 SDGs that you can focus on in your classroom with your students based on that data. And then the other question was on out-of-school children and taking this to the grassroots level. Yes, I mean, I see this be successful when it comes to SDG education, working, directly with communities in non-formal education. This is so important to engage out-of-school children and ensure that they receive quality education and get them integrated into either the education systems or other mechanisms. And so in our program, we don't only work with formal schools. We also allow teachers to join from non-formal education communities, from nonprofit organizations, from refugee camps. So anyone that wants to engage and learn about the SDGs and how to teach them, we train them and they are parts of our programs. So we had one specific example. We had a teacher from Uganda that never worked in a formal school during her whole time with us in the program because of shutdowns due to the pandemic. But she was so successful with engaging students in her community and the grassroots level and doing radio education that she eventually made her way to the kind of the official SDG office of the government, and they were so happy with her work and excited and gave her SDG cards. So it is possible to do this work outside of a formal setting.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. That will be all for the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
If anyone would like to connect with other questions, you can please feel free to request me on LinkedIn, which is Amanda Abram. And we can also further the discussions. I would be happy to, speak with anyone about further ideas and kind of the opportunities we have for teachers. And I want to say thank you so much for this invitation. I really enjoyed being here presenting with all of you. I really appreciate it. So.
Thank you. We truly appreciate you as well. And on behalf of the leadership of AIIDEV Africa, I say a very big thank you to you. Thank you for the invaluable insight you shared with us.
Thank you so much.
So moving forward, we have our second guest speaker on the call with us. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening, sir. The second guest speaker is in person of Dr. Charles. Dr. Charles is a social entrepreneur with combined working experience across 6 different industries. He does in agriculture, veterinary medicine, technology, energy research, and not-for-profit organizations. His previous roles have explored business operations, networking partnerships, talent management, account and finance, and clinical research. He has managed partnerships and grant-based projects with critical organizations, including USAID, AIIDEV, FAO, and the United Nations. He is the head of resource mobilization at Murtala Muhammad Foundation, Lagos. He also volunteers for organizations as such as Faith Foundation and AIDEV. Following his passion for SDG advocacy, he founded the Mafobe collectives, focused on academic LinkedIn optimization, career and business advisory support for young professionals worldwide with over 247 clients across 9 countries. He is also an alumnus of the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, University of Ibadan, Enterprise Development Center, Lagos, and Takaidia Institute and Columbia Business School, New York. Thank you for joining us on the call, so you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ramat. Good evening. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, sir. You're welcome.
Yeah, so can I get started? You might need to make me the host so I can share my screen.
Okay.
I have 2 accounts, so I think both accounts are fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're the host now on
Okay,
one of your
thank
accounts.
you. Okay. So just a minute, please. Okay, I think it's clear. So yes, I'm good. Good evening, everyone. Yes, evening in Nigeria here. Good evening. Thanks for having me here, AIIDEV. So yeah, my name is Charles, and I'm here to talk to us about grant writing and proposal writing, or grant proposals, as some might want to call it. And then I want to, to the best of my knowledge, most of these information can be easily gotten online on YouTube. I just Google them and then get to have access to some of these. But from my experience, I would want to add the pitching angle, because that seems to be an aspect of the grant applications that most people are not really aware of as well. And then I'm going to be giving as much tips as I can. So I might stray away from the academic sounding or technical sounding aspect and give us more of a real life situation. More of real life situations, or what I've experienced from my work. So, okay, I put a puzzle here, but I think we have an audience on YouTube, so I'm not too sure if I might be able to see the answers. But yeah, so this is just a riddle for us to get or to guess. What can you put in a bucket to make it weigh less? So I don't know if you have an answer to the question. You could probably put it on YouTube somewhere. I think you can have the discussion later. I think we can probably come back to it towards the end. So yeah, the question: what can you put in a bucket to make it weigh less? I would love to get an idea on who got the answer right. So going straight to the topic, I might have Ramat, please, can you confirm how much time I have? 1 hour, 45 minutes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So okay. Thank you very much. I'll work with time. So today we just start with grant application. Basically, by definition, it's a formal request for funding that individuals, organizations submit to grant-making bodies. It could be any of these options listed as well. I think I want us to note two basic keywords there. First is the formal request for funding, and then the second is that you have to submit it to the grant-making body. So most times when we mention the word grants, naturally what comes to people's mind might be free money, or free money with a level of accountability per se. I think it's worthy to note that from my experience, because I've been involved in a lot of grant applications, as well as also been a pitch judge for most competitions that have to give out grants to some of the top 2 or 3 winners and the likes. And from my experience, when it comes to grant writing, when it comes to proposals, so grant writing is actually applying for or grant application is applying for the grants. Now, not every grant requires you to submit a grant proposal or a proposal per se. So don't assume that if you want to apply for grants, the next thing you have to do is to go and spend a lot of time working on your proposal. Working on the proposal is going to be good enough, but then it could depend on the context of who are you preparing that proposal for. I'm going to touch that sometime later in the topic. But one thing you should notice when you're applying for a grant, the most important tip or advice is you have to align to what the grant-making body said you should do. For example, let me take you applying for a job. You check online for a particular job. It could be the head of programs for an NGO in Kenya, for example. And the job says to apply, send your cover letter and your CV to this email using the job ad or the job posting title as the subject of your letter. If you, of your application, if you probably could put a nice CV and a nice cover letter, but you did not address that email as assigned or as informed, you might actually miss out on that application because it could probably be interpreted as something else. So the instruction was send these documents to this email, but abide by this. Now, if the job says, if you're interested to apply for this position, click on this link. You have your CV, you have a cover letter standby, that is good. And then when you get to click on the link now says, start filling from A, from B, from C, from D, and the likes, and start filling everything. And they could be surprised that at the end of the day, you don't need to upload your CV. They don't need your CV. They don't need your cover letter. Aspects of your CV will have to be included in separate boxes of the job application. That means they have a system to kind of look to everything important and kind of arrange it the way they want to be able to assign, identify the stronger candidates and those that they can shortlist for recruitment. So it is very similar to when it comes to grant application. Very, very important. I think if at all we don't get okay, sorry about that. So if at all we don't get any information from this session, one important part we don't want to miss is you have to abide by the instructions given by the grant making body. So if they said in terms of applying for the grant, submit a proposal, or somewhere in the application process you're expected to submit a proposal, all well and good. But if the grant body said you should probably click on this, sometimes some of them, especially when you're applying for grants with bigger international organizations, the United Nations, Food and Agriculture Organization, UNICEF and the likes, World Bank, they would probably want to create a profile on their portal. The profile will to have some information about you. Then you now have to create a profile. The profile to talk about aspects of your business, your business or your the particular and whatever it is you're applying for the you're using to apply for the grant. So please, it's very, very important that you abide by the instructions given. So that means I think in context when I work with my grants application teams, we spend a lot of time doing a research to identify some grants. Then the next thing is to kind of, in a roundtable session, because we usually have a team of 2 to 3 and or it could be more, we now review the grants plans step by step to be able to look through what needs to be done. So that means if they give us some instructions that, okay, you have to do this and this and this, then we have to identify people that have to do that. So it's very important that you get to do it this way. And one part, and that is why I decided to include it in my presentation, one part most people don't prepare for, you get a nice proposal or you get someone to write a proposal for you, which is very common. One part most people don't really prepare for is in the context of, okay, you've applied for the grant, you've done your research, you've seen a good grant, you've applied for the grant, and then it seems you're well positioned for the grant. And at the end of the day, when it's time to probably are going to the next stage, you're now told that there has to be this level of, you have to now make a presentation, you have to present a pitch of your project, especially if you're preparing for a project. So I assume this is the Teach4SDGs, so I'm probably looking at more content towards innovators and educators. So you probably have a program or a project that's going to identify that's going to solve some particular problem in the educational sector in your community. And then you're told to prepare a pitch deck to tell you more about to talk more about the project and the likes. What are some of the things you need to prepare? Now, this presentation is not going to specifically break all the aspects of the pitch deck one by one. It's just some tips to help you prepare so that you don't get to be surprised when you get to some certain stages in the grant application process. So when it comes to a pitch, it's basically a presentation that outlines features of whatever it is you want to present. And when we talk about pitch deck, it could just be the presentation per se. For example, I'm making a presentation, it could seem I'm pitching or I'm educating or teaching you about this. But when it comes to pitch deck, there are different forms of pitch deck, and usually means you have to apply to the different, let me see, the potential audience that you're looking at. For example, if you're talking about you have a business or you have a project and you're looking for funders, the funders have different categories. It could be equity funders, those that probably want to get a chunk or a part of a business or want to run the business alongside you. It could be people that just want to, maybe people that just want to give you money to spend for the project. For example, the Tunenimelu TEF grant is something like that. I think $5,000. Get a very, very good project. Once you qualify, they give that to you to be able to solve that as well. There are different levels of, this context is going to be people that are willing to invest in your business. The form of how the investment is coming in is now what might be different. The kind of pitch deck you present, or when you even apply for grants that fit into those kind of that kind of criteria is different. Now, of course, if you are a CEO or a founder or you're in charge of a project, sales pitch is actually something very important. You might assume sales pitch is specific for those in the sales sector, but then you're actually selling your idea, selling your project and the like. So getting elements of how to pitch or how to sell something is very important as well. Product pitch, it could be probably it could be a tech product, it could be a physical product, maybe in an e-commerce store, or a physical product in almost any kind of store. So it's very important that you learn how to work around this. Then similarly, something like this will apply to all of us here, the project pitch, and then also the aspects of the job pitch. Because of time, I'm just going to give us some tips in terms of writing grant proposals. One important aspect you need to know is you need to identify, know what you need before you seek the grants. Now, it is not everybody that you should reach out to for money. If you are preparing a project that is focused on probably classroom management or making education affordable or easier for students in a particular area community, then you want to research, and if a particular investor, a particular grantee or grant giver, making organization are interested in funding projects specific to climate change, and the project has nothing to do with climate change, not even in terms of potential collaboration or potential partnerships, even if you're applying and you're pitching your project in any form, it might not see the light of day. So you have your project in mind. You have to ask yourself, what do you need? Sometimes you could even mean that you don't necessarily need a particular, probably you don't even need money to be injected into the project. You could probably need a particular partner. It is also very, very important that you have that. So what are the basic needs that you have? Do you need money? How much money do you need? Do you need collaborations? Do you even need to partner with the media and the likes? All these things are very, very important when you're preparing proposals for your grants. And like I said, you have to align by the specific instruction given by the grant making body. So on their website or wherever I saw it, would have listed eligibility criteria for the companies or for the people that are pitching or applying for the grant, and then they'll probably listed some of the checklists and balance. Checklists that you need to have available. So it's important that you have to align with that before you even start applying. Then even before you even start applying for a grant, to an extent, sometimes some people check online and they get a look for grants that might actually be appealing to the industry. If they prepare proposals towards that grant, that happens a lot. Sometimes people have existing projects or existing projects, and when they see a grant that applies, they just fine-tune that project and present it. Sometimes people even have projects that they've been doing for about 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then if they see a grant available, that the grant might probably inject options for them to be able to expand and scale up that project, so they get to apply. So this is the same grants, but these are different levels of applications. Somebody has not done it before, but felt, okay, I'm good at writing, we can actually work around this, and then we do this. Somebody had that in his mind, I've already documented it, and probably even applied once or twice, but had not even actually done the project per se. And then somebody had been doing the project for a while, and then it's getting to apply. So in these 3 contexts, there are different merits and demerits for some of them, but we're not going to go into that. But one important aspect is, in terms of budgets, you want to be able to talk about your budget areas. Now, it's interesting. It's important that you, like I keep saying, abide by the instructions given by the grant-making body. It's possible that some grants will want to match your funding. If you need $50,000 for your project, they will tell you that they're willing to offer about 70 or 60%, and you have to source for the remaining 40%. If you somehow miss that, and probably during the course of your application, you are asking for the total ask, which is about the $50,000, it's very, very obvious that you did not align yourself to what was instructed per se. So when it comes to your project, you want to be able to break the budget as much as possible. I won't really delve too much on the aspects of the budget as well. I'm sure some of these resources can be found online, but I think 1 or 2 slides is great. We address some of these as well. Then I think another part that some people seem to miss is in terms of timeline. For some of us that are in the space, you'll be familiar with something about Gantt chart, and I'm sure for the Teach4SDGs program, I'm sure the concept note probably talked about, okay, in January, you're going to, the application portal is going to be open. In February 20th, it's going to close. They continue review applications till March. They'll have the interviews ending of March. The orientation starts this and starts this. Then in July, you have a boot camp. In June, you have maybe a training session like this. At this point, you have a master class. At this point, you are being merged with a particular project team. At this point, you pitch your project. And at this point, maybe the winners are selected. And then at this point, you join the alumni community. That is what a timeline should look like. There are different formats. For those that have the Gantt chart, you could probably be broken down in 2 months specifically. Like, okay, in the month of January, these are, so you want to have the, it could probably be horizontal, vertical, depending on the context used. But you want to have the months on one side, and then you want to have the activities on the other side. And then I want to probably put bars to just show that the recruitment is going to start from January 1 to mid-January. This will start this. So anybody that looks at that will be like, okay, if the major focus of the project or the major execution aspect of the project in terms of the implementation framework is going to be in July, just looking at that glance or that timeline, they know, okay, these are the activities that will be put together at this particular period. So if the grant-making body, for example, they're interested in supervising some aspects of the project or even coming to inspect some aspects of the project, then the application is going to teach them, or is going to even let them know which part of the project that they should probably be preparing towards inspection as well. So the timeline is very important, whether it's going to be by days, whether it's going to be by weeks, whether it's going to be by months. You want to have the timeline and then also have the specific activities. Sometimes you want to break them down into milestones. Activities might not necessarily mean go to this, speak to Sunday, speak to Joseph, speak to this person, speak to this person. Those are mini activities inside a particular section of the project. Activities could probably be in terms of maybe sampling. You want to probably use data from my hospital, or use data from the from WAEC, or use data from JAM, for example, to be able to shortlist some schools within your project or catchment area. And then you want to, from breaking down the data and the like, then you want to have the community visit, to visit the gatekeepers of the community, then get to visit all those other activities. So you want to be able to have a logical flow of how it's going to run at the end of the day. Very important as well. I'm still going to touch on other parts. And then, like I said, it's very important that you define your goal. So I'm sure we're all familiar with proposals and the likes. It's very, very important. The goal, and because this is an SDG focused program, one of the smart ways to work around is to be able to align your goal to the particular SDG that's aligned with. And I'm sure if you're not familiar, while you might have the number of SDGs available, each SDG has some I might want to call them some sub parts. I don't want to call them sub SDGs. But if you are looking at, okay, for example, zero hunger in the world and the likes, zero hunger is not just standing alone on its own. There are some sub parts of that aspect that says, okay, for example, you could probably open an agricultural farm and you're probably planting maize. That attests to zero hunger. Another way could be teaching people how to be able to minimize waste of maybe farm resources. Another way could be teaching farmers in terms of, there are different aspects that you can actually contribute to have a project around that is addressing that zero hunger. And don't just assume that the most important thing is just to put food on the table in front of people as well. In fact, in terms of even temperature control, water control and the likes, and all those other things can even add more to that aspect as well. So it's very important that your goals are well aligned. And then when it comes to the budget aspect, I think just, sorry, because of time, I won't have too much time to shoot most of my other slides. I'm going to show this in bits per se, but when you're looking at your project, at your budget, same thing with the same thing I said earlier, some grant-making bodies, or even some people that are requesting for funding from, will give you a budget format to follow. So in as much as it's smart to have your own budget and everything kept aside, like I said, it's very important to do your research and read be as detailed as possible when going through some of the requirements to be sure that you are not missing anything. Some of the grants I've been involved in applying for, there's going to be, in fact, they'll send you an Excel sheet that you have to download, and there'll be specific instructions. Download this Excel sheet or make a copy. Don't edit it. Of course, they'll not allow you to edit it. Make a copy, save it with this, save it this particular way. You get, fill this in this one. And then some of the Excel sheets are even nice enough that they already have some formulas already, some formulas available there. And then some checkpoints that says, okay, when it comes to this place, fill this, fill this, fill this. So it is very, very important that you should be as detailed as possible. I want to advise, I don't know the kind of project you have on ground, but it might be nice not to work alone. If you don't have a co-founder or a project coordinator, somebody else you're working with, you're probably not to get one or two friends in your team, and then somebody helps you to do a bit of the research work and the likes. You can have a brainstorming session, 2 or 3 on the table to look at what you've done so far. And then another person probably helps you to proofread. Or you want to probably get a senior member, for example, to help you to proofread or to written before you get to submit them. Most times when you're applying for some of these grants online, once you're done, there is going to be a progress bar at the bottom. Once you get to the final stage, they'll give you a final option to be able to review everything you've done. That part is very important. On my team, what to do is that even if somebody is applying on behalf of the foundation or company, when it gets to the final stage, you call it like a roundtable discussion, and then we shoot it on the screen, and then everybody gets to check, are we good here? Do we miss a spelling? Is this what we want to push out here and every other thing? So those kind of things kind of increases your chances to be able to get to the next stage as well. So when it comes to funding, like I said, follow the guidelines of the funding agency as well. Learn how to categorize your budget. If they are requesting for direct costs, indirect costs, don't have personnel costs, logistics, depending on how they label it. If not, you can just probably follow a typical guideline. And it's nice to have, even if you don't have a finance person, an accountant on your team, probably could be a friend of yours or somebody that is being outsourced. Your books are being outsourced to. But it's actually nice to have a finance person probably join you in drawing up the budget, because they can easily help you align or something. So that I don't want to go and call maybe miscellaneous, you don't want to go and call it something else, and all those other things. It's better you align by some other, for some other things. So also important as well, do not estimate. If most times you're applying to a foreign currency-based grants, I think one of the things I do is, even if I'm not using the CBN official rate, probably I'm even using a particular rate, what I do at the bottom, and even when I'm applying for the grants, one thing I notice, even if I'm getting it from a particular website, for example, I get the link of the website, push it at the corner post the exchange rate, 1 naira to X dollars or $1 to X naira, and then put the dates and the time. Okay, it's very, very important because it's very, very possible that somebody, sometimes I've had an experience whereby the grant making body went to that site and had to backtrack and put the particular dates. For example, it was probably you said 12th of April, and $1 was to maybe it was $1 to like 1,200 naira, and then they put it back to cross-check. So those are just some of the tiny, tiny details you want to put to make sure that you are not overestimating. For example, you are probably working towards $1 to 1,000, and then by the time they are reviewing it, probably in 2 months' time, their value had gone high or the value had gone low. Such kind of things can actually position you to make it look like you're not shooting yourself on your foot as well. And I think another important aspect is, even if it's not written on your budget, show how you are going to be able to track your expenses. Some grants we inform that, especially for the high-level grants, in terms of the people you have to put, because some cases you have to mention people that are going to be working with. It's important that they'll ask you for your probably chief operations officer, but most importantly, your chief finance officer, whoever is going to be in charge of the finances, especially if it's an international grant that is strongly focused on accountability. So they don't just assume that they will only work with the CEO. Your finance person, some can go as far as getting the LinkedIn profile of the person, even getting a CV of the person to get an idea of who is going to be managing the finances as well. So I think in this section, one thing about grants is so you've seen the grants, you've got your proposal, or you fill the form and every other thing, and you've applied. The next stage, they'll have some short lists, they're going to have the due diligence and all those other stages as well. But then there's a particular stage that sometimes it gets done. Most times you see some pitching options like this in probably incubator programs like this, you could be accelerator programs, so any program that just gets young people together, train them a bit, and then position them for potential funders, especially if the program is being designed by the funder. So sometimes way ahead is not just to use the big English to apply and every other thing. You need to make a pitch presentation. Some companies are beginning to do, funders are beginning to do hackathons or pitchathons and the likes, and these are some of the skills you want to learn. So one thing I usually advise my audience is Dragons, then most of all this, the apprentices and most of all these programs that they are pitching to the public in terms of business, watch as much videos as you can. You can learn a whole lot from that. Some could even tell you they need 3 or 4 slides. Some could even tell you not even bother putting anything on the screen. Just come and talk to them. There are different formats. But I'm just going to give us some tips in the context of preparing for a pitch. So a pitch could generally mean, like I said, it's a form of presentation, but there are 2 options. One is the presentation you're putting out there that you could actually submit. We usually call it the pitch deck. And the act of pitching is the act of actually presenting your pitch to an audience. It could depend, there are different audience options available. So these are just some of the things you want to know. So I think we'll talk about it later. Keep it as concise as possible. You probably want to spend a bit more time, if you have time, to be able to explain some terms than to put as much words as you can. So you don't have to read from the screen as well. Start with a strong hook. If you're looking at an innovative project or program for the educational sector, or as a teacher or something in your community, somewhere I think 2 of those slides that I'm going to give us some examples. I think these slides are available to the team so they can actually share it. I gave some examples to kind of give you options of some strong hook you can start with either at different levels of your presentation. Another aspect is business model in terms of if you're presenting, probably even if it's a profit-making model, it could be a project model in terms of how is the project going to run and the likes. Something like this is also going to be a part of a pitch as well. Then your target market or your target audience. If your project is going to target school children between the ages of 5 to 11, it's important that you have something like that listed on your pitch. If as well, it's not just, okay, sometimes it's from grants and options, you are being asked who are your primary targets, who are your secondary targets. Sometimes they might even want to ask who are your primary beneficiaries, who are your secondary beneficiaries. For example, if you are going to train 5 teachers on ICT in a particular school, your primary beneficiaries could be those 5 teachers. If at the end of the day, each of those teachers had a classroom of 100 for the whole year, and they're probably training them in January, then your secondary beneficiaries could be each teacher multiplied by the potential number of people they might actually influence directly. That could even be either the students, probably 500 students. If it's something that's even going to expand into probably extra lessons or even community visits and the like, you want to be able to have a general idea. So for most founders that are interested in impact, we're going to talk about that. These are just some of the things they want to get an idea about. So in terms of the target audience, it's actually good that you have something like that listed as well. Then if you are not doing it alone, you have a team. For example, we're talking of AIIDEV. I've seen the team on LinkedIn, very, very strong team as well. So you want to list your team and the specialty of your team. I think I have a slide that's going to talk about this. This part is probably even going to be, if I probably mention one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 parts of a pitch deck or even a grant application or review, this part plays a very, very strong role. I joined the later part of the last session where the last speaker was talking about you can connect with our LinkedIn. So one important aspect is your LinkedIn profile needs to be strong. Personal experience, I've been in a group whereby we applied for a grant, we finished the first stage, second stage, it was a lot of money coming in. Third stage, and then the fourth stage after the pitch deck presentation is now what they call the due diligence aspect. So what happens is that it could be physical, it could be virtual, it could be a session like this, and then the founder or the investor, whoever they call in to represent them, we go to the profile of every single person that is on the management level of that organization or that project, especially if it's for a project that have a lot of financial commitment. So what they want to look at, they're looking at a lot of things. Firstly, is they want to look at your profile. How do you look like online? Number one. Number two is how involved are you in the project? I've known 1 or 2 companies that were disqualified because their CEO had about 3 or 4 other side businesses to do. Okay, so looking at LinkedIn, they did not even say anything. In fact, the company probably listed under a volunteering role. And then I think kind of things went well for them and they were applying. So it seemed he forgot to update it, but then that kind of thing downscored because while they might not have access to the CV, anybody can Google you online. They might see your project research in school and the like. But one major thing I'll push out there on the professional space, is going to be your LinkedIn profile. So you want to position it well. I'm going to touch this as well. Then very, very important, another important aspect is if you're probably asking for funding, then you want to be able to outline how you're going to go, how that money is going to make a difference for you. And then that's what we call the ask. Some grants will tell that they have $50,000 available, but they do not expect you to expressly ask for the $50,000. Well, you might need to have the ask. It has to align to your project. Sometimes it's even possible that your project might go beyond 50,000, and you could be like, okay, we need 50,000 from you. We're going to source for the remaining 20,000 to make it 70,000. Sometimes it doesn't even have to go beyond. Go to that particular amount. Sometimes they just want you to be able to abide by that as well. Very important. Another aspect is I've applied for United Nations grants. Sometimes when they help you to recategorize the budget in different areas, they'll tell you that, for example, in terms of personnel, it should not exceed beyond. So they want to divide it. They're looking at $50,000, $25,000 for this, $25,000 for this. And then when you're looking at amount to pay your salaries, to give a cap that it should not exceed 30% of the amount listed for this kind of cost. It should not exceed this one. So it's very, very important that you abide by that as well. So I'll just try to, because of time, I'm almost halfway done. I'm just trying to brush through the rest. So when you're looking at a pitch deck, interestingly, some of us prepare pitches per se or the pitch deck in the context of keeping it aside and hoping for someone to give us money. Most times, in companies I've worked with in the past or I've consulted with, I tell each company to have 4 levels of pitch decks or 3 levels generally, depending on the kind of business they do. Even if you are a not-for-profit or you're just working on a project per se, I generally recommend you have at least 2. One is going to be focused on your investors or your major partners. This is the part that talks a lot about the money. Another part, you need to have something on standby for your staff. I generally recommend CEOs or co-founders when you're hiring, especially your senior management. You have to prepare a mini pitch deck. Sometimes during interviews, you spend a lot of time asking candidates questions, and we don't give enough time. Probably even it's possible that there's some stuff listed on the website, especially if the candidate looks like a good hire. Especially at that interview session, is a give and take. You want to be able to tell more about your company and give some contextual information. You don't just want to hire the person in and then allow probably maybe some other staff to be able to help you handle that aspect, especially if that staff is going to come in to handle some aspects of projects. So I've worked with teams and I've told them that the CEO needs to be able to work with the HR department to prepare a pitch deck for volunteers or a pitch deck for staff that they want to hire. And then when it comes to these different presentations I'm making for this different audience, one aspect, I think you can get access to this slide to get more information on this. When you're looking at your investors, for example, one of the major things they're focused on is in the context of return on investments. Like I said, this is someone that's giving you money and they're not giving you the money for free. They're not dashing you the money. You're probably going to pay back at a point, or you're probably going to give them a chunk or shares in your company and the like. So they want you to be able to show them the run of, if I give you $50,000, you spend it for this for year 1, what is it going to look like? What your finances look like? At what point will you break even? At what point will you start making profit? And at what point will you be able to pay back some aspects of this? These are for investors that are giving you money, strong on accountability, and it's more like an investment for them. Some impact-driven investors, in the context of return on investment, they are not focused on how you can make money back for them. The focus might be in terms of impact to potential reach and the like. So if you say, okay, For context, I've started this project. I've worked with 5 schools in Ogun State, for example. We've reached about 300 students, 3 communities, and all those other things. And then by the time you inject $50,000 into our project or into our program or into this venture and the likes, we can use this money, scale up, hire more team, probably fill a partnership with maybe organizations like Teach for Nigeria, Teach for All, maybe the Ministry of Education and the likes, and reach 10x, 15x, 20x potential beneficiaries and the likes. These are some of things done to you. That means their money is not really giving them money back, but it's helping them make an impact, especially if it's a CSR focused funding project and the likes. Then another aspect could be, sometimes in your project, you probably want to have suppliers. In terms of if you're dealing with logistics sensitive, but you probably want to be able to get some item, maybe school books, it could be sanitary pads for girls. It could be almost anything that's going to add to your project. So you want to be able to have an aspect specific to your suppliers. So this is not just the ideal way to be able to group them, but in terms of what they might need to hear, I just group them roughly this way. In the context of your if you're pitching to your customers, you're pitching to your audience and the likes, you could probably ask yourself, okay, you have a project, why do you need to pitch to your audience? In the context of pitch, you're probably going to community to talk to the king, talk to the leaders, to talk to the principal of the school, to talk to the commissioner of education and all those other things. The kind of presentation you would make to an investor or a partner is not the ideal kind of presentation you want to make to these people. So it's very important that you align that as well. Then for context, if you're having probably some of your project is going to be a bit sensitive on the regulatory authority aspect as well. It's very important that you be able to learn how to address that. So this slide just shows you some of the general audience groups you might want to give a presentation to, especially if you're preparing for your grants and the likes, and what are the kind of things that will motivate them to give you more attention, and then how do you address that in your pitch deck. So I promised earlier that I think these 2 slides are a bit wordy, but I'm just going to touch about one on each of them. But if you have a project, and I'm not sure if it's going to be part of your program here, but if sometime in future, after your program here, your Teach4SDGs project are going to be able to, you need to prepare pitch decks or prepare proposals and the like. These are just some important aspects you might not want to miss. It's very, very important to tell stories. Storytelling helps a lot in grants. For example, most times, usually watch a lot of adults. Most of woke up, you went to school, there was no light, you failed this exam and this and that, and it decided, okay, why don't you have solar powered lights from a community? And those other things. So something is not just enough to go online and search what is the general problem of education in Nigeria and then start listing them. It's very, very important to give a general story, especially if it's something that has affected the community, and how that is a major program, how that fits into the SDGs, how your project is coming to help you address that aspect of the program. Like I said, if you're looking at zero hunger or quality education, your project is not putting everybody in school immediately or giving everybody degrees, but you need to play a role, no matter how small, to be able to feed into another, that if ever that thing, or if your project is replicated along a huge line, it's going to be able to make a general impact that can actually help us stick to an extent aspects of achievement of that SDG to an extent, depending on the context per se. So it's very important that you have to identify the problem, and then your solution has to be unique. If there are probably 20 of you in this program and they are presenting different projects individually, then it's very important that you assume that whatever solution you're bringing has to be very, very unique to you as well, and not necessarily probably be the same with every other person, even though you might even have others as partners, but your solution has to be unique. And like I said, another important aspect, you might have a particular project in your mind, but it's very important to align with what the grants people want. If they say they want your solution to be tailored towards probably AI technology in schools, or probably energy options for schools, or probably educational materials for schools, it's important that you work your way around aligning yourself towards that as well. And data is very, very important. You want to be able to do your research to get access to what is the current data available out there for Africa, for Nigeria. What is current data available for Africa, for Nigeria? What is current data available in that state, in that community? And then when you bring in your project, how much is it going to make an impact on that data? Are you looking at, okay, there's a 20% reduction or there's a 40% increase in this? When you bring in your project, no matter how big or small it is, what kind of role is it going to play? It's very important that you have data to look at the general outlook in terms of the beneficiary communities of a project, and then on what a project can offer as well. Then I think the rest of this, you can actually go through it. And when you're looking at the pitch deck, it's going to be very, very important to include as much visual aids as possible. You want to put fewer words, as much as possible if you can. Probably pictures, some metrics and all those other things, graphs and the like. It's going to help you give a kind of pictorial view of what you're trying to pitch to people as well. Then I think one important aspect again, when you're looking at your grants as well as a pitch, most people kind of miss this aspect. Rely as much as you can on building partnerships. If, for example, you've gone through training from AIIDEV, for example, you've gone through training from UNICEF, for example, you've gone through training from even if it's JAM, for example, you've gone through maybe some training options as a CEO or as the person in charge of the project. If you partnered with 1 or 2 organizations, if you volunteered for 3 or 4 organizations, when you're describing your background as a CEO, you're describing aspects of your project in terms of the collaboration and partnership aspect. Mention those things. The fact that you be trained by quality institutions as this, the fact that you volunteered for quality institutions as this, and the fact that you are currently seeking to partner and you have an existing partnership with institutions like this will give you an added advantage over somebody that is saying, I will train, I will take this course, I will do this, I will do that. So it's very important to focus a lot more on your strengths, especially when you're preparing that. I've applied for a grant where the focus of the grant was on elimination of violence against women. And one of the things they asked was the CEO, at least top 1 or 2 or 3 managers in the foundation. I mean, they wanted it to be that project you're applying for, they needed somebody that had, I mean, it's important to have somebody on the team that either they've experienced that in terms of probably being a victim to an extent and are trying to fight back, but they're coming from the legal angle, or they've led 1 or 2 initiatives that's looking at tackling that. So they want it to be people that have experienced or have a bit of experience in that. So it's not necessarily someone that just coming out from the blues. And then another, I mean, the remaining 4 other aspects as well. In terms of applying for grants, I think another thing you want to be able to put in your pitch deck, depending, is also, I mean, for example, how has the grants process been like? An important aspect is some people are, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, have applied for some grants and they missed out on the grant and they got to understand why. It's just like saying you're applying for a US visa, for example, and you want to apply the next time. One of the first questions, I mean, they obviously are aware that you've applied before. Then they want to ask you that, okay, you're applying again. From that last time you applied till now, what's changed? If you say, maybe they said you don't have close ties to your country, and then you got married, you got landed properties, and you got all those other things. Those are the kind of things you want to bring to the fore the next time you're going over there. So it's also important in either giving a pitch or all those other things. So even in writing a proposal, you want to talk about some of the things you've done in the past. You've applied for these grants, you probably got these grants, you go to this stage, and all those other things. Very important as well. And then it's important that your project is not just focused on something that you want to do for 6 months and it ends. Okay, one particular tip that I usually give to most people is, if you, no matter the project you're doing, look at the way of involving community members. If you're looking at a project that's focused on probably developing classrooms, so let me look for something like this. Okay, project that's looking at, for example, you're looking at, probably eliminating debt in the environment and all those other things. It's not just enough to say for the next 6 months, my team will wear our uniforms, come to this place, clear up all these things, take pictures and go. It's very, very smart for you to see how to involve the community members. So if your project is going to run for 6 months and there is no option of you getting another grant again, how are they sure that if they go there at the 7th or 9th or 12th month, they don't see those hips back there again? So in terms of sustainability, are you looking at involving corpers? Are you looking at involving community members? Are you looking at involving youths in the community to be able to train them so that by the time you go, your project ends, they can actually continue? When you have those kind of things listed in your project and you're able to prove to the investors or the funders that you can actually carry out something like this, don't be surprised that by the time your grant is, you've gotten a grant and it's getting toward an end, you could reach out to that they are looking at the granting process and want to offer you the grant or another level of the grant to continue either in that particular community or replicate it across some additional communities. I think in terms of the impact measurement and reporting, I'm going to talk about that as well, and also that of technology. So on a general note, So on a general note, when it comes to pitching your ideas to investors, like I said, make a presentation deck. There are lots of formats online, lots of templates online. It's something I can easily find, but these tips I'm giving you are something that you might not easily see online. Most of them are already previewed for you and every other thing. But like I said, always work with what the instructions are. Don't use the same, just like using the same CV for every job. It shouldn't be that way. So you cannot use the same cover letter for every job. It's very important that you align with this as well. Practice your pitch. One thing I do as well is I present to my team members. I tell my team members to make a mock presentation to us. It could even be to their friends or whatever, but it's important that, especially if I go to pitch virtually or pitch in front of an audience, stage fright and all those, so that if you want to be able to address that as well, time yourself. And I think just because of time, let me just go through the rest. So one important question most of us might need is, how do you research for grants? there are lots of options available. When you go to the slides, you could see, like I said, finding the right funder for your project, adhering to their guidelines. And one thing most people seem to forget is also research your funders. It's not just enough to hear that this person gave money last year and then I do another round this year. Find out who are those that won the grants last year. If you could even connect to them on LinkedIn, do a bit of research, reach out to their founders. All of them are human beings. They are available on LinkedIn, most of them, I believe. Reach out to them and say, okay, I'm interested in applying for this grant. What can we have a meeting, or can you just give me some tips or metrics of success and all those other things? Very important as well. Then geographic relevance, very important. If it is said that this particular project or this particular funding is for projects in Jigawa states, and you are in Enugu state or you're in Lagos state and you apply, and your beneficiaries are not in Jigawa states. In fact, everything related to your project is not in Jigawa state. There is it's expected that you are not going to be shortlisted for the next stage. So please, geographic relevance is very important. Please, it's very important to do your research. Not every $10,000 or $20,000 you feel is already yours by divine intervention. It's very important that you align like this. So government ministries, international groups, online database, educational associations, very important as well, NGOs, very important that you also work with them. So you can actually go through the slides. I think just to give us a short note on how easy it is to be able to do your research. I went online and I Googled top grants for teachers in Nigeria. For example, assuming you're looking at a teacher-based grants project and the likes, and these are just some of the options that could come available. And then also another thing is that sometimes some of these grants are not exclusive. It's not just anybody that can apply. It could be that a particular funder could reach out to the AIIDEV that's organizing this program and say, okay, for each of our cohorts graduating, we have access to $5,000 for 3 people. At the end of each program, do a pitch-a-thon or hackathon competition or something like that. And we're going to fund the best 3. So if I'm not a part of this program and I see that grant, no matter how I apply, I'm not going to get it because I did not pass through the eligibility requirement, which meant that I had to go through this program and graduate successfully from this program, probably get my certificate and be eligible for that. Okay, so there's some things we call accelerator programs, incubator programs. There are different kind of programs, but the organizations like the same one I'm handling this, that will inform me, that will make it an option whereby you could get access to their resources, get to learn like a school, but they teach you on all these things and position you well. And then because you're alumnus of the school or whatever, you can now apply for the funding. That enough has positioned you better than an average person. So when you're checking, don't just focus on checking for the grants like it's showing on this site here. You also want to focus on looking at other options as well. So to help, I think when you get this slide, I'm sure it's something you can click. There are like 3 or 4 or 5 options. Yeah, 3 options available. These are existing grants currently for 2024 that are focused on the educational sector. Some of them are state-specific, some of them are beneficiary-specific, some of them are project-specific and the like. So it's going to probably give you a bit of head start to be able to click on them and now understand what are some of the things needed, what are some of the funding available, especially for the educational sector. These funding are not for you to go and do a master's, but they are funding to be able to have you get to a project within a community focused on the educational sector and then to be able to explore that as well. So in terms of applying for your grant or funding or whatever you want to call it, one important thing is start early. If the program is saying we start by February 1 and it ends by March 20, you don't want to wait by March 19 or March 18 or even 1st of March. Start as early as you can. For the smart CEOs or the smart project managers, what they do is they've identified some projects. They've even done to an extent concept notes and proposals, kept them handy, your CSC certificates, your all sort of documentation, your passport, your biodata, and every other thing. Create a Google database and keep everything there as handy as you can, such that the moment a project comes, all you need to do is to gather your team, read through, get a document from your Google database, update it and edit and whatever, review. And this can even help you apply within the first 5 to 6 to 7 days if you have a team and you work very, very fast. Don't wait till it's very, very late. Because as the applications are coming in, the people reviewing the applications are actually reviewing it on a first come, first served basis. And it's very, very nice that I can make a first impression. And that means as more are coming, they're checking the criteria of what they need, and they're probably comparing it in their heads with other applications that are still coming up later. So it's going to position you on a more favorable note as well. Then another focus is how much do you need and what are you going to use that money for? It's very, very important that you are able to explore that as much as you can. Okay. If you've managed money in the past, you've got to funding in the past and you've explored and you've done all those things, it's very important that you also state to them as well. Then use plain English. Sometimes most of us go to ChatGPT and we copy, in the realm of learning prayed about this. All those. So I mean, most of us that are very, very conversant with it, there's some words you see on LinkedIn and like, oh, this ChatGPT, and it doesn't look like it's that original as well. And they don't use too much jargon. They're trying to communicate as much as possible. You don't necessarily even know those that are going to be reading that. So make your English as plain as you can. And then, it's, like I said, another important aspect, don't assume that you've done well. Get probably a senior friend. It could be an advisor. It could even be a mentor, even someone that trained in the past, but someone that's very, very good at spotting these things, and talk to them and let them help you review your application. And then one important aspect that most people don't miss in terms of relationship building, you can talk to the grant making bodies. Sometimes when we've applied for grant, I've gotten to maybe the stage of due diligence, especially if most of the grants are from the international space. There's lots of back and forth on the emails. You want to be sure that you're having everything right. So sometimes you want to be able to ask for clarity. Some grant making bodies also have a session, they call it an FAQ session. If you be on their website, sometimes they want to have a session maybe 2 or 3 days after the first date of the grant application starts. It's important that you have to do your research to understand that something like that's available. And if you're not going to be there, have a member of your team join in. Sometimes they can record it and share with you. Other times you can even look at the recording device they can attach and then see how to record it. But then that is where they get to touch on some of these salient points to be able to guide you. So I have a video here, but because there's not enough time, you can probably, I think the video should play on the slide I shared. So I think I touched about, I'm almost rounding up, an important aspect when you're preparing your pitch deck, when you're preparing your proposals and the likes. This is a pitch deck format that I've worked on before, but I have to change some of the names and cover some of the pictures. Now, when you're talking about your team, you're the CEO or you're the co-founder, you have your founder there, you have your chief of finance there, you have your project manager there, you have a program officer there, you have a volunteer there, and all those other things. It's not just enough to put their names. A very smart way is you want to assume if you have your money to give to somebody, what are the kind of things that make you a bit more relaxed or comfortable in terms of accountability? Your mind is okay. So imagine I'm asking for $50,000. So this is just a typical example. There is a Dr. Bola Emeka Haruna. He's the CEO of this technology based in Lagos. He's the, let me say, the CEO of the business. He's a managing partner. Okay, he's a managing partner of this. He has 10 years experience in this. If you've had 15 years experience as a teacher, you've had 2 years experience in corporate this, you've had 4 years experience in edutech and the likes, or any member of our team have that. The names, okay, the current role in the company or the project or the foundation or whatever it is, and then their years of experience, very important, general years of experience. So it could probably be 5 or 6 or 7 years. And then sometimes you want to put all those other competencies in brackets, edutech, education, teaching, and all those other things. It's good to provide a bit more insight. And then I actually recommend, although it's going to be smart if possible, to put a link, a hyperlink to their LinkedIn profiles. It makes it a lot easier. So all those questions they're going to have in advance, you've helped them to answer it. So this is what your typical team presentation should look like. Pictures, full names, then their position in the company or the foundation, their years of experience, general years of experience, and then their specific competencies as well. Please, very important. Then I think this is not directly related to teaching, but this is something I worked with. I've worked in an agri-tech in the past, and this is what we use for pitch deck. So this company, I mean, we had been in existence for about 7 or 8 years then, and we're doing a lot of stuff. The general story is just like a junior for farmers, okay? So in designing a pitch deck, a stronger part you want to focus on as well is on your solution. My previous slides, in the one that is very, very well, I talked about some of the potential solutions you want to bring in. So primarily looking at this picture, looking at, okay, mobile app, inside sales, field agent, blah, 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 everything inside your mobile phone. So that is okay to an extent. And then when you're giving your pitch deck, I can spend more time, you can spend more time explaining what your solution slides should look like and everything. If you want to be able to make it, if you want to put animation, you want to put data, you want to put pictures, you have to speak to the founders as well, and then they can even get to ask a lot of questions from that. And so this is another group, they call themselves Act to Win. Their project is more like a bit climate focused, and their solution is coming in 3 areas. You plant a tree, you take a picture of yourself with the tree that you planted, probably at different ages or stages, you get a gift. You clean your local area, get your team to clean the local area, and then you post pictures, you get a gift, and participate in all those kind of things. So in terms of their solution to the particular SDG, or what their project is planning to solve, this is how they presented it. I think another aspect, again, when looking at your pitch deck, especially in the part that you have to prepare towards your grant and the likes, or even if you're having a proposal, it's nice to have, especially for those that are at the advantage of, you've either volunteered in the past, or you've done this project in the past, or you've been busy in the past, have pictures. It's enough to say we've hit 200 schools, 300 community members, and all those data and the like, but pictures can help you back it. If you can get pictures that you probably volunteered, or you're wearing your uniform, or just something that signifies that you've done this stuff in the past, or you've done something in the past that enables you to be able to manage that project effectively, it's very important that you're able to present something like this in your pitch deck as well. And then I think another part is sometimes you've applied for the grant, you put your proposal, you've gotten the grant. Like I said, you've done your due diligence, they've checked through your team members, everything is okay, you've gotten the grant. Now, what happens, and I think this is my second to the last slide, what happens that at the end of the day, you don't get access to the funding after the first batch. Ideally, if you work it in a smart way, the fact that they've gotten access to this funding, if there is going to be a granting program, they're going to be releasing a grant year on year from the same donors, and you position yourself for, you can actually get access to that funding on a yearly basis. But the point is, sometimes you get this grant, and at the end of the day, it ends after year 1 or 6 months. They are not even interested in following up with you and everything. What are some of the pitfalls that you need to avoid? Most important aspect, maintain communication, even if they don't ask for it. Because of the interviews, the due diligence, and the application process and the likes, even by the time you got the grant and they said, and yeah, another important thing, if you have to get a grant or to win a grant, don't rush online to go and post it, particularly from your official handle. Don't go and share any information anyhow. You have to get prior permission from the grant giving or grant making institution. Sometimes they want to have it in a coordinated manner, that they prepare a presentation, a picture, put your picture and everything in there, and then give it to you and tell you that, okay, from on the 20th of May, from 8 o'clock p.m. GMT +1, you can post. So please don't just assume that you're going to do some of this. Some of this can actually get most of us disqualified at some certain stages. So it's important that you get to manage information. Always communicate. Sometimes what I did is I asked my funders, is it possible that we can have a monthly check-in meeting? Even if they're not demanding for accountability, that is what usually makes some of us stand out. At the okay, we started this project, we said in the timeline, January, February, March, this is where we're going to be. But unfortunately, it started raining, there was a security issue or whatever. This is where we are now. These are the challenges we had. And very important, these are the challenges we had. And how are you able to mitigate against the challenges? Don't say the money is not enough. How are you able to work around that? So it's very, very important that even as you are listing challenges, you're also talking about how you're able to work with your team to work around those challenges. So now that you've let them know that, okay, you met some gaps and you're able to address it, they can say, okay, for example, I've been part of a group where we got a milestone-based funding. I think it's about $50,000. It was supposed to be released in batches. So we started the first project and the milestone was supposed to be in like 3 months. So towards this, at the end of the first month, we met some gaps that we were able to really work around, but still worked around it, but kind of delayed to an extent some parts of the project. It was not requested, but we informed them that I wanted to be having a monthly check-in meeting. They were the only, to that extent, the only people that got the grant that introduced that kind of system, and they said, oh, well, that's good. Because of that relationship, I will open up, told them what we're experiencing. At the end of that first month, remember the $25,000 or $30,000 was supposed to come in. At the end of the third month, after we finished milestone 1, I've submitted milestone 1 and they've checked everything and they're very, very sure. But because of the transparency and how we handled it, they're like, okay, this problem you're having can be solved by funding. So they made an approval and review of the process, and they released, I think, 30% of that funding that should have come at the end of the third month. They released it at the end of the first month to help us speed up on the project. And of course, because they released it at the end of the second month, or I think 2 months and 1 or 2 weeks, we're able to deliver on that particular milestone. So communication is very important. Don't forget, we are working with a human being. They're like you and I. They're on LinkedIn there. You can access them on different options. So please open that communication line throughout the course of the project as well. Another important aspect as well is to partner a lot more with the program managers. Very important as well. Then towards the ending of a project, or even at the halfway towards the project, want to probably do a mid-year or a mid-project impact report, what you've done so far, and at the end of your project, want to do an impact report and to be able to share it. Make it as comprehensive as possible. Cover your budget, your team, challenges, wins, and all those other things. That's very important. At least media also helps. Take as much pictures as you can. Then towards the ending of a project, sometimes they want to call you for this. Other times, because you've initiated the engagement process, you want to share your learnings. And now it's interesting that some international funders are interested in funding some pilot projects in Nigeria. And what they call it pilot project one, if you've done your research, you find out that this is the first time they're doing that project. Your learnings and your insight and your feedback is going to be very, very important to them. So that by the time they are interested in probably funding another batch, either in Ogun State or in Lagos State in additional states, they can actually even say, okay, since they've worked with you, help us execute that project. Very important. So please, it's important that you're able to discuss your learnings, the good, the bad, the ugly. Look for how you package it and discuss it as well. Then I think there is a particular document here that is very, very interesting. If you've gotten funding and don't know, how do you manage it effectively? That, in fact, if you manage it well, even if they don't have additional funding coming, they can commend it to other donors or other funders. I think it's a report by one of the I think European funding groups, but it's a very, very important report. I don't have time to show it, but just click on this link below and then get access to that report. It's just about 2 pages. And please, if you don't have a graphics person on your team, it's important to have. When you're talking about impact reports, you could prepare a 5 to 7 pages of impact report document that is going to be lengthy to read. It's not bad. It's usually expected at the end of the grant process. But another part is you want to prepare something like this. We usually call it a 1-pager. It could be a general summary of a project. You probably want to have to connect it. You can look at something like this. Probably they had their CEO picture. They had some of the pictures of the project they had. They had some of their impact numbers. They had some pictures of the beneficiaries. They had a lot of things and everything. This is the kind of paper that you could just share to, even if it's a potential funder or even somebody in past or any partner that was involved in the project. They don't have time to go to 7 pages of probably font 12 for Microsoft Word and every other thing. But everybody will have the time to go for something like this. And some funders can have a general, probably end of the year event. If without asking, prepare something like this and you have a very, very good relationship with some of the funders, when they're having I've been invited to a particular program like this, I have to go to Kenya to represent my company and I have to design something like this, because at the end of the day, people are going to call on you or your team member, come and talk about your project. If there's a screen available, or even if it's to prepare, I had to print flyers of this and I had to make a virtual option available. There was a screen, I had to put it, project it there, people saw it. It's a lot different than coming out to say, thank you, we got this money, we did this and that. So this shows a bit more professionalism on your side. So please, if not, have a programs person on your team or have a graphics person on your team that can help you get all your data together, work with data analysts, get the data and see how to effectively present it this way. So I believe to a large extent, I'm been able to cover some aspects of grant and proposal writing and pitch presentations from my own experience. While I was unable to give you specific templates on grants or specific templates on proposals or specific of what a typical pitch deck should look like, it's just like saying you're asking for specific what a CV should look like or what a cover letter should look like. It has to align to what the people that are giving you the money or the people that are requesting for it are asking. But from my experience of over, let me say, 5-6 years of being in this space and the likes, these are just some of the tips I feel is very, very important that you make sure you abide by. And this kind of things can make you have access to both the grant application process, the due diligence process, and the post-grant application, the post-grant process, whereby I can get to manage the relationship and probably get your success going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. This was a very wonderful session. It was a very interesting one, and I believe I'm saying the mind of every other participant on this call. It was very educative and informative. For the questions, unfortunately, most of the questions that we are asked have been answered by you at the course of the presentation. The last statement you made about the specific grant proposal template and the likes of it, they've been asking on the comment section and it has been answered by you already. So I believe that is covered. And for those asking for the recordings, this is always going to be on YouTube. So anytime you want to come back to revisit this video, it's always going to be on AIIDEV Africa page on YouTube. So just search for AIIDEV Africa and you're good to go. So I'm still checking through to see if we have any more questions, but at this point, I believe we don't have any more questions. There are no more questions on the chat. Yes. For the first question you asked, can we still go through the few response from the participants? The first question at your introduction.
Okay, yes. So maybe you can show me the, I won't be able to see it, but could you, I don't know if you could read some of the answers. Let me see if we could get, let me go back.
We have the first person saying paper. Another person, that was Hassan Umar. Nana Hawa was saying air. Another person, a sheet of paper. We have nothing, foams, balloons, paper, feather, air. balloons again, balloons, nylon, feather, water. The answers were whole, air, balloons. So most of the answers were whole, balloons, air, paper, feather. Yeah, I think that's all we have. Someone said helium-filled balloons. Oh, we have cotton.
I don't know if I should give the answer. I should just give it at the general. I'm sure it's something people can find online, but I think I'll just give it as an assignment to us to check online to get it. It's quite an interesting answer. So if you just check it online and then you get like the answer.
So at this point, I would like to appreciate your effort and the invaluable insights you shared with us on behalf of the leadership of AIIDEV Africa. It's a very big thank you to you. Thank you for joining us today and thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
So I believe we've come to the end of the session today. To the participants, we're still going to be back here again next week, same
All right, I think there is a network issue there. So yes, it's been a wonderful time this evening. Thank you so much for joining. Kindly use the form that will be posted to fill your attendance on the YouTube. So do well to fill the attendance form. The link will be posted shortly. And let's get engaged. Let's ensure we stick to our mail to receive updates. So far, it's been a wonderful season. We want to say a very big thank you for everyone for joining this evening all across African country. We say stay productive and keep up the good work over there. Till we meet next week, do have a wonderful evening. Thank you.